You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm Pooh.
And I'm William Cooper.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sweetheart.
You're welcome.
Folks, please take note of the following scheduling changes for the Worldwide Freedom Radio Network. Monday through Friday nights, all times are Eastern Standard Time. 5 until 7 p.m., the Hour of the Time, with yours truly, William Cooper. Monday and Tuesday nights, 9 until 10 p.m., Quest for Health with Michael Cottingham. Thursday nights, 9 to 11 p.m., Home Satellite Radio Show with Dan Morgan. Friday nights, 9 to 11 p.m., Friday Night Live with Gary Bourgeois. And Saturday nights, 9 to 11 p.m., the very best of the Hour of the Time. So don't go away. We'll be right back, folks, right after this. Welcome to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper, the man President Clinton named in a White House memo, which Rush Limbaugh read on the air, as the most dangerous radio host in America. And it's true. For these socialist, communist scum that have infiltrated and are destroying our government from within, exactly as they have promised since the beginning of socialism, are liars. Chronic liars. Everything that they do and say is a lie. And therefore anyone who wields the sword of truth is dangerous to them. In fact, as consistently as the truth is wielded on this broadcast, it is a wonder that we're still here doing it. I must tell you that, because but that is exactly what keeps us safe, as being in front of the public eye. For any move to hurt me or my family in any way would be an admission that everything that we've been saying is absolutely correct. And then they would create a martyr, which they certainly don't want, and I certainly don't want to be. However, I would not shrink from the duty should it call on me. Hydrogen is a potential new energy source. Well, how many times have we heard that? It's true. Hydrogen, if they could figure out an economical way to manufacture it, is the perfect energy source. It's clean burning, and as a byproduct, only water is created. H2O, pure water, as a matter of fact. Combine hydrogen with oxygen, and you have pure water, the purest water that you can possibly imagine, with no other byproducts at all. And so people have been attempting to create engines that will run on hydrogen and all kinds of things, and they have succeeded in doing that. They've even tried to create engines that would run on water with some process of breaking down the water and then recombining the oxygen and hydrogen molecules. But you see, that's nonsense. It takes more energy to break the water down into hydrogen and oxygen molecules, or atoms, actually. Molecules, actually, is the right word. And then recombine it, then it's worth. And to create pure hydrogen or even impure hydrogen as a source of energy in these engines is prohibitively expensive. But guess what? There is a process now that is showing promise. And you know me, folks, I wouldn't be telling you this if there wasn't something to it. There's a Dr. Randall Mills who is sort of throwing physics the way it's traditionally been known right out the window. If he's right, the way the world produces and uses energy is about to be radically transformed along with science's understandings of the physics involved. Now, I've long been telling you that in secret, whatever you perceive as the state of the art of any technology in the public sector, in secret they're 50 to 100 years ahead of that. And when it comes time to change or upgrade or move the human race onto a new plateau by these social engineers, then they bring something out of the closet and introduce it. And physics, as it is taught in our high schools and colleges, in the back door of the secret college, so to speak, if you could sit in on a meeting of the Jason Society, you would find out that it really isn't correct. And for reference to who the Jason Society is, see my book, Behold a Pale Horse, or go back to the episodes of the Hour of the Time where we covered it, because I've got too much material in these 2 hours to be re-educating things that we've already done before, even though I know that I probably should. If he's wrong, of course, same thing's going to happen to him that happened to a lot of other people going after cheap, non-polluting energy sources. But this is an article right here. I've been following what this guy's been doing for some time. And as is our policy, we don't talk about things until we believe that there is an element of substantiation to it that can be documented and proven. This I'm going to give you from an article that came in the, let me see, Hydrogen Energy Source. This is from Reuters Information Service, Malvern, Pennsylvania, April 1st, 1997. Dr. Mills has developed and begun to demonstrate in laboratory tests what he says is a very efficient and non-polluting means of producing energy from hydrogen. He says a fuel cell the size of a desk could, in theory, supply the electricity now produced by an 8-floor high coal-fired boiler. An 8-floor high coal-fired boiler. And a 200-horsepower car engine the size of a suitcase could power a vehicle 4 times around the world on a single tank of water. Now listen to me carefully. A 200-horsepower car engine the size of a suitcase could power a vehicle 4 times around the world on a single tank of water. Now, it doesn't say how big this tank of water would be. Maybe this car is pulling a railroad tank car full of water. I don't know, because it's not specified. Maybe it's a gallon. Again, you have to understand that I don't know how big this tank of water is. The technology and Mills' private company, Blacklight Power Incorporated, have begun to attract investment from the electricity industry and the support of some energy experts. A leading organization of physicists, however, calls his idea groundless, as they always have, and it's always the same ones. And they're usually being funded, ladies and gentlemen, by grants from oil companies. Even some who support the technology say its practical application remains at least a few years away, and from what I've read and studied of this so far, that's correct. Maybe quite a few years away. Mills is a Harvard-trained medical doctor with additional education in engineering and chemistry, and he believes that whoever has this technology will potentially dominate the energy industry. And I'm going to tell you right now, if this is correct, and if he perfects it, and it looks like he will, because some big players in energy are investing many, many millions of dollars into this company. And you know that they don't do that unless there's really something there. The technology is based on a theory of quantum physics that challenges principles that have governed the science for decades. Mills says the theory has been supported by experiments and observation. It holds that hydrogen can exist at a lower energy state than its common ground state, and the heat energy released in the transition to the lower state can be captured. Mills told Reuters the theory explains phenomena ranging in scale from subatomic quarks to the cosmos. In using it to make power, the cost of hydrogen easily obtainable from water, would be minimal compared with fossil fuels. And there's more than enough water to last until the end of the earth, he said. But, there's something here that worries me. He says capital costs also could be significantly lower than conventional power technology, although others familiar with the technology said that remains to be seen. Now, here's what worries me, ladies and gentlemen. First, he says we have enough water to last till the end of the earth, and then we hear this. The byproduct of the non-nuclear process is a hydrogen atom with a lower form of energy called a hydrino that floats off into space. Now, if that's true, and over a many period of years we use lots of water in producing energy with this gizmo that burns this hydrogen in this process, and all these hydrinos float off into space, we may not end up with enough water to last till the end of the earth. That's what bothers me here. If the byproduct is a hydrino, whatever that happens to be, and I'm not really sure, and that hydrino floats off into space, and it is a particular breakdown of the water that they began with, how will these byproducts be used ultimately by nature to reproduce and replenish the water that's used? And I think that should be addressed. The other key ingredient in the process is potassium, which serves as a catalyst and can be constantly reused. The process takes place in a vacuum and instantly stops if the vacuum is breached, making it inherently safe. And it goes on and on and on, several pages, as a matter of fact. And it's very interesting. Again, the company is Blacklight Power. And we've been watching their development for quite some time. And now some real big players in the energy industry are beginning to put large sums of money into this small company. So I got to tell you, folks, if it's a hoax, if it turns out not really to work at all, some of the biggest experts in the scientific and energy field have been fooled by it. And they're not easily fooled. Also, the traditional reaction from the scientists who operate on grants from major oil companies are, as they traditionally do, opposing this, which gives it even more credibility than anything else could possibly give it. And so it bears watching, looking into, and I wouldn't invest in it, ladies and gentlemen, simply because sometime soon the stock market's going to come tumbling down, and maybe sooner than you think. It has to. That's one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto, is to eliminate the middle class and bring all the social levels, if you will, what they call the different classes of society, to one level, and that's the lowest level, in socialism. Ultimately, there will be two classes, the rulers and the ruled. They will say that it's one class, but if you study the history of socialism, the ruling class is always quite a ways above the ordinary folks who are slaves in such a system. Now here's something from USA Today, page 15A, March 31st, which was yesterday. And, oh, and by the way, in case you're sitting there wondering, I'm not going to pull any April Fool stuff on this broadcast. Never have, never will. Never have and never will. You can take it to the bank. USA Today, page 15A, March 31st, 1997, by Jack Levine. And it's under a photo of Timothy McVeigh. And apparently, Jack Levine, who, by the way, has traditionally been an enemy of those of us who revere constitutional Republican government. He's a director of the program for the study of violence and social conflict at Boston's Northeastern University, and he's a co-author of Hate Crimes, The Rising Tide of Bigotry and Bloodshed, which is so poorly researched and so obviously a tome of propaganda that to read an article like this written by Jack Levine is sort of good. I won't say it's good. I won't say it's promising, because I don't believe that leopards change their spots that easily. But I'm going to read this to you. You can make up your own mind. The Oklahoma City bombing trial of Timothy McVeigh that opens Monday will inevitably revive the public's image of militias as gun-toting, bigoted groups on the fringe. McVeigh apparently had been linked to a civilian militia in Kingman, Arizona. Now, folks, I've got to break in here because that's a bold-faced lie. It's a bold-faced lie. Timothy McVeigh has never been linked to any militia in this nation at any time, ever, period, by anybody. And the FBI issued a press release stating as much, that there was no militia connection, Timothy McVeigh did not belong to a militia, and there was no militia conspiracy. Right out of the mouth of the FBI. So this is just a lie. The socialists make this stuff up all the time. They call me a white supremacist. I'm married to a Chinese woman. I'm part Native American. My children are all mixed up. They're the most wonderful children in the world. But let me continue. His, quote, Bible, unquote, was the infamous Turner Diaries, a fictionalized account of a coming civil war in which revolutionaries bring down the federal government by bombing federal buildings and disrupting public utilities. Yet recent surveys show a growing number of mainstream Americans have less and less confidence in their national government, too, and consider many of its rules and policies a threat to their rights and freedoms. Maybe not all of these militia members are so far out on the fringe after all. Some of this was brought home to me recently when I went to a patriot potluck attended by militia members, survivalists, and assorted right-wing political discontents. We met in an obscure dinner theater just north of Boston. I brought an apple pie and an open mind. I joined members of the Patriot movement as they swapped ideas, listened attentively to a parade of speakers, and lunched on pasta salad, sandwiches, and my apple pie. Along the sides of the room, vendors hawked anti-New World Order T-shirts and conspiratorial literature. In unison, we sang patriotic songs and recited the Pledge of Allegiance. I confess feeling a little nervous to be among people who are convinced that our federal government has been taken over by communists, but I went to learn more about the militia movement, its members, and its causes. From Ruby Ridge to Oklahoma City, civilian militias long have been linked with violence and bigotry. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me break off here once again. The militia had absolutely nothing to do with Ruby Ridge. Randy Weaver was not a member of any militia. Randy Weaver was also acquitted of all crimes that he was accused of after they murdered his son, murdered his wife, shot him and his friend Kevin, and terrorized that family for a long time. With over 500 federal agents, armored vehicles, helicopters, armored personnel carriers, and at one point even sent a robot up to the door of Randy Weaver's cabin with a telephone on it, and they asked him to pick up the telephone. They had a shotgun on the robot trained to blow his arm off if he had done it. And by trained, I mean pointed at. Okay? So this person is a propagandist even in attempting to do us some justice. He's a liar, like they all are. Militias had absolutely nothing to do with Oklahoma City or with Waco, Texas, or anything else that he's mentioning here. Period. It's a lie. And if anybody out there has any proof to the contrary, please send it to me so that I can see it. Because I got to tell you, I've investigated these incidents more than anybody else in this country. And there is absolutely no militia connection to any of them. Now let me continue. Whenever he tells a lie, I've got to break off and let you know about it, because there's some people out there that because it was in USA Today will think that it's the truth. Because if you want to know the truth, anybody who believes just because it's written in a book or in a newspaper that it's the truth isn't playing with a full deck of cards. In fact, I think they're just absolutely stupid. From Ruby Ridge to Oklahoma City, civilian militias long have been linked with violence and bigotry. It's a lie. Total lie. Absolute lie. According to the stereotyped image, which is the truth, it is a stereotyped image, all militia members are nothing more than a collection of bomb-throwing hate mongers. That's why I was so surprised when the 75 men, women, and children at this meeting seemed so hospitable, even innocuous. I did hear a racist comment from a speaker and an anti-Jewish remark from a member of the audience. But I also met a few dedicated members of the movement who were themselves black or Jewish. I also was impressed by the utter boredom of their speeches. Through a 5-hour procession of speakers, I heard much less about guns and bombs than about economic survival. Speaker after speaker talked about how to defeat the Internal Revenue Service through common law courts, how to withdraw from the Social Security system, the impact of free trade on the unemployment rate, and how to avoid debt. I got the strong impression that these were Americans who had suffered through hard economic times and were looking for some way to explain their shared predicament. Their response was to blame the federal government, communists, the United Nations, and international bankers. Any group that believes the enemy has surreptitiously taken over the White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court is potentially dangerous. What a bunch of blathering bullshit. Not if it's true, ladies and gentlemen. They're only dangerous to the insurrectionists who have taken over these institutions. And they have, and we have proven it time and time again. He says these so-called patriots are no exception. But to treat the entire movement as a collection of crazies is just as dangerous. Many of the issues addressed at the gathering were every bit as much the concerns of middle-of-the-road Americans who struggle to survive in the face of downsizing, global competition, and income inequality. They may not join a militia or stockpile weapons in anticipation of a revolution. They might not even attend a potluck meeting, but they nevertheless are convinced that the government is no longer working on behalf of ordinary citizens. Conspiratorial thinking can be used to discredit alienated right-wingers, but it also can be seen as an indicator of the lack of credibility of mainstream institutions. In a recent Gallup survey, only 9% of adult Americans reported having a great deal of confidence in the executive branch of the federal government, and only 10% said they had a great deal of confidence in Congress. A decade ago, those numbers were nearly twice as high. On the issue of honesty, government fared no better. 44% rated representatives and 39% rated senators as lacking in ethical standards. Perhaps this explains why 83% of adults reportedly believe government regulations are a very serious or moderate threat to Americans' rights and freedoms. Even conspiratorial beliefs about government are by no means restricted to the fringe. A recent survey found that 75% of the population believe the government is involved in conspiracies, and 20% agree with Pierre Salinger that federal agencies covered up information about the TWA crash off Long Island. There is a natural tendency for government to respond to extremism with repressive measures that give even more power to law enforcement to investigate and infiltrate marginal groups. In the short run, such measures might prevent a violent episode or two, In the longer run, however, they reduce the individual freedoms of all Americans and only push potentially dangerous groups already convinced that the government is out to get them underground. Of course, Americans of goodwill should be vigilant in response to a growing threat of terrorism perpetrated by our own citizens. But if we are careful to look past the stereotyped images of the patriot movement, we may learn something about our country that needs to be repaired and is within our power to change. The need to work together as a nation to create a sense of trust and social responsibility that transcends the differences that divide us. If we succeed, the patriot movement will probably wither and die of its own irrelevance. But if we don't, then today's extremism could easily become tomorrow's version of moderation. That's the story. He's trying to be nice, but in even trying to be nice, and even trying to recognize that there's something wrong, because folks, sooner or later, if they don't do that, they're going to turn off even more people. And according to their own statistics, 75% of the population believes that government is engaged in conspiracy. How about that? That's something you didn't know. And I think it's pretty hard to fool 75% of the population. Now, I can tell you right now, our government is the Constitution for the United States of America, the Bill of Rights, and the lawful amendments thereto. That's the government. That's it in a nutshell. No matter what else the government may be, or how big it may be, or who is in it, they are restricted by the restrictions in that Constitution, and the only powers they have are the powers granted within that Constitution, nothing else. I don't care how many regulations they write, laws they pass, edicts they throw out, executive orders signed by the President, or Supreme Court rulings. What I have just told you is the truth. So, those of us who call ourselves patriots, and that's a dirty word today, and militia members, are sworn to protect and defend the government, the Constitution for the United States of America, the Bill of Rights, and the lawful amendments thereto, even unto death. That's what scares these socialist puke-faced clowns. You see, because they're in the process of destroying our government, not us. We're only dangerous to them because we support the Constitution. And that's the truth. We're not white supremacists or hate mongers or bomb throwers. We're American citizens who are a little smarter than the average, a little better educated than the average, who understand what's going on and intend to fulfill our oath. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. And that's the extent of it, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, folks, it's probably not. How many of you have a patent deed or a patent title to your land? If you don't, it's not yours. What you probably have is a warrant deed, which means that somebody owns it, but it's not you. You see, a warrant deed just warrants that a deed exists, and it's in the hands of the true owner. And that's really what this phony money system is doing to you. You never really paid for it if you used Federal Reserve notes. And that's the truth. That's why you have a certificate of title to your automobile instead of the actual title. Never thought about that, did you? A certificate of title certifies that a title exists and is in the hands of the true owner. And you're not it. That's why you have to pay registration fees and taxes for your land and for your automobile and for your home and everything else. You see, if you truly owned it, it could not be taxed. You would not have to register it. You see, but you get conned into all this stuff because none of you know anything about the law. Nothing about it whatsoever. Not the slightest little bit. You've been conned into believing that the law is so complicated that only lawyers can understand it. And that's exactly what they want you to think. So that you can be controlled and manipulated and destroyed if they want, simply because my people perish for lack of knowledge. Now I'm going to tell you something that should raise the hackles on the back of your neck. Unless, of course, you're a Zionist. Not long ago, in a major newspaper in Israel, and I read the story on the air, verbatim from the paper, cited the source and the author, that Israel now controls the White House, the Senate, and most of the agencies of federal government. And when they say Israel, they really mean Zionism. And don't get all bent out of shape and think this means Jews, because it doesn't. There are many, many, many patriotic American Jews. There are Jews all over the world who are not Zionists. There are Jews who never go to synagogue and don't believe in all of the stuff that's taught there. What I'm talking about is international Zionism. And I'm going to tell you something else that's going to make you angry. All of these people who believe in the British Israelism concept of the world are Zionists. Jerry Falwell is a Zionist. In fact, there are more Christian Zionists than there are Jews who are Zionists. That is the truth. It all revolves around religious events that happened long time ago, and the persecutions of a people over many hundreds of years that led a faction of them to develop a philosophy called Zionism, which enabled them to endure their misery with the promise that they are the chosen race of God and will someday rule the entire world. For the ultimate goal of Zionism, I don't even like to say it, the ultimate goal of Zionism, ladies and gentlemen, has nothing to do with the creation and the preservation of the state of Israel at all. The ultimate goal, folks, of Zionism is the conquering, without a fight, of all the nations of the world and the rule of the entire world by the Zionists, who, by the way, is not defined as Jews, but as the Anglo-Aryan race. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, and then listen to this. You will not see this in the New York Times. You will not see it on the communist news networks. You'll not see it on ABC, NBC, or any of the communist-controlled media. The Arabs are afraid that Israel might be planning to rebuild the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And they have good reason for these fears. Chairman Yasser Arafat of the Palestinian Liberation Organization raised this subject in the wake of the Israeli decision to build 6,500 more houses in East Jerusalem. Now, folks, you have to understand that there can be few more sensitive places in the entire world than the Temple Mount, where the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque now stand. And you have to understand that the Muslim world consists of a tremendous number of people who consider the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque as the holiest sites in their religion in the world. And they will fight to the death over that one little few acre spot of real estate. The last big clash, in fact, the last major Israeli-Palestinian violence occurred when 61 Arabs and 15 Israeli soldiers were killed last September after Israel opened a new entrance to an archaeological tunnel which runs under part of the Temple Mount. The Arabs said the Israelis were undermining their holy sites and trying to Judaize the city. Now, don't get all wrapped up in these terms they call each other. It's propagandizing is what it is. Arab fears, ladies and gentlemen, about the Temple Mount were raised in January when it was revealed that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had given the head of the Greek Orthodox Church in Israel a silver bas-relief map for Christmas which depicted a Jewish temple in place of the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque on top of the Temple Mount. The map showed a reconstruction of the second Jewish temple, which was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. This is volatile stuff. This is dangerous stuff. And for Benjamin Netanyahu to do this must have been an intentional act of aggression in order to stir up the Arab world. And it could be suicide for Israel. Why in the world would he have done this? Unless he wants some sort of conflict to take place, and it's one of the reasons why I have predicted very soon there will be another war in the Middle East. Because this is about the worst thing that you could throw in the face of the Arab world. Now, PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat has reacted. At an extraordinary session of the Arab League in Cairo on the 1st of March, Arafat presented delegates with photographs of the new Temple of Solomon that he said the Israeli government is planning to build on the debris of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. This photograph was taken from the present given by Netanyahu to the Greek Orthodox Patriarch. This is serious stuff. This isn't a joke. Because I got to tell you, if Israel really felt threatened by the Arab world, they possess and would use atomic weapons, including hydrogen bombs. And maybe they're trying to spark a reaction from the Arab world that would cause them to attack the state of Israel so that they could use those atomic weapons and destroy the entire Arab world in 24 hours and then build their temple. Does this sound like the ravings of a madman? It is, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm not the madman. This is nuts. And this is a time of sharply rising tensions following Israel's decision to build 6,500 homes for Jews at Har Homa in East Jerusalem. That means there's an increased likelihood of attacks on Jewish settlers by Islamic Jihad, the fundamentalist group of Hamas and the Popular Fronts. And in response to the increased threats created by all of this, the commander of Israel's Central Command, Major General Uzi Dayan, has asked the Council of Jewish Settlers to maintain a high state of alert. And they've been told to carry firearms at all times and to improve security at the settlements. That's nothing new. Nothing new at all. Anybody who's been to Israel will tell you everybody carries guns all the time, which is very comforting in a way, if you believe like I do, and in another way it's kind of scary because a lot of those people are religious fanatics, nuts, wackos out of their head. Listen to what Lebed says in Russia. He says in order to have democracy in the country, one should have dictatorship in the government bodies. Oh, don't you just love it? See, you got these nuts calling themselves the Illuminati running around thinking they're going to perfect the human race. Not on your life. Not on your life. The human race is too crazy. It has too much crazy history. It has too many crazy people reared by crazy people that makes them even crazier. It has too many religions that all claim they're right and claim all the rest of them are going to hell or going somewhere or not going somewhere. It's whacked out. And everybody, of course, falls prey to the temptations of the flesh and the mind and everything else. We battle those individually every day, don't we? Some of us win those battles. Some of us lose those battles. Nobody always wins. One of the biggest problems is somebody mostly loses most of the time. Those are the people who cause most of the problems. Most people try to be good most of the time, I think. A lot of them give in to temptation and are not. Some give in once in a great while and are the ones we admire the most and try to emulate. Everybody's got skeletons in their closets. Everybody has given in to stress or anger or sexual temptation or something at some time in their life. And they try to hide those. Usually you'll find the people who are the quickest to condemn others for their human failings are the ones who have the most to hide in their closet. Hypocrites, they're called. These things are serious, folks. These things I've imparted to you today. Dangerous, very dangerous. And don't think for one moment that Israel would not loose an atomic rainstorm upon the Arab world if they really felt that they were going to be destroyed. They would, without a single moment's hesitation. Dear Bill, thank you for your kind words on the air. How did you know that I embarrass easily anyway? Like now, since I just heard that on a tape today as I caught up with things around here. I usually get home right at the end of the first hour and catch up later when I rewind the tape in the evening. I fell behind sometime this week, or last, and have no idea if I'm up to date yet or not. Ever feel that way? Or would that be ever not feel that way? Yes, I feel that way constantly on a daily basis. It's almost impossible to catch up around here. If you don't believe that, call my secretary and ask her. She'll be happy to tell you that it's true. I just finished a letter to the Lucis Trust for the information you spoke about lately regarding the World Invocation Day. I was reading and listening to that tape today, and when you got to the part where you were actually covering the, quote, invocation, end quote, I had to say to myself at the end, as if I was saying an invocation as one of these idiots, quote, may my blankety blank swallow my head, end quote. Then I laughed out loud till I nearly cried. As usual, you have me on the edge of my chair, wanting to get my hands on these people's own published work to show other folks. I expect that, also as usual, I will find you to be accurate to a T. The more I learn, the more I see a need to learn more yet. The information these people print on their own is so much more convincing than anything else I can get before other people's eyeballs that I am constantly amazed that so few people have a clue about what is going on all around us. I can hardly wait to get the stuff. In my own studies, as I work along here, I have at least gotten to the second book in the Secret Doctrine set I have had for some time now. I read some of Blavatsky's crap and then read some other books for a rest from it and time to digest what I have read. The information is daunting in its scope and hard to keep rolling with, yet it builds up like rust in a pipe, a little at a time. Little by little, I almost think I have nearly a small understanding of Blavatsky's convoluted presentation. Without your program, though, I would be much less able to pick up what is going on in these books. It has become clear to me that if Blavatsky's ideas are what the world religion is to be, then these people are really counting on people being way too stupid to even scratch themselves near the itch. Wait till you find out, my friend, that that is true, unfortunately, of the majority of the sheeple. And it's because they choose to be that way. They don't have to be. He says, I keep seeing all kinds of BS about this God and that God and God's plural, while all along these gods are described as being a secret that none may know about, even though the reader is expected to believe that Blavatsky does know about them and other such nonsense. I am incredulous that the idea that these various gods would bother with such stumbling thinking at all seems not to be bothered with by Helena P. Blavatsky at all. Clearly, this is all coded crap that has worked in past history to seize control over fools and fearful children of all ages. If for no other reason than to understand to what depth these people disdain other people, this kind of study is important indeed. Their opinion of our value versus their own value to the world is so very different, it is not even on the same chart. Having a clue as to what value these people would place on our lives indeed alarms me. Dirt or grains of sand may mean more to them than we do, and yet I cannot bring myself to devalue them in kind to that degree. I am obviously getting tired and have begun to muddle uselessly. I shall close here and carry on with other letters. I have been meaning to write to those whom I do not hear from nearly as often as they should. God bless you all. Jerry. Thank you for that letter, Jerry. And every once in a while I try to read a letter on the air. This is from a thing called the Prophet Report, Spiritual, Political, and Investment Issues, 1997, volume number 2. And while I disagree with some of their stuff, I agree with some other of their stuff. But what's important in this issue here is they have apparently done some research that has verified a lot of the research that I've done and imparted to you over the air. And so I'm going to read this little article to you. The Order of the Templar. Now listen carefully, folks, because your conception of what the Knights Templars were versus what they actually were is two different planets floating in the universe. One of the many secret societies of the past 1,000 years is the Order of the Templar. A review of its history will shed much light on the meaning of prophecy. The order was formed about 1100 A.D. The small group of founders managed to gain the approval of the Pope and go to the Holy Land. With Jerusalem in the hands of Christians, they proceeded to tunnel under the Temple of the Mount. What they found is unknown, but they returned to Europe very wealthy. What is known is that they did not seem to make any effort to comply with their charter, which provided that they would protect visitors to Jerusalem. Recent tunneling under the Temple of the Mount raised the ire of the Muslims, and this bit of history may well be connected. The order was discredited. Many letters from the Vatican culminated in a formal attack by Innocent III in 1207. Finally, in 1306, Clement V issued a summons. One of history's most sensational trials then followed. It was shown that the order practiced Satanism. The details parallel the evidence produced in trials of Satanists in later centuries. A papal bull instructed all rulers to arrest all members of the order. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was arrested on Friday, October 13, 1307, and that is the origin of Friday the 13th being a bad luck day, in case you didn't know where that came from. The date Friday the 13th is still considered to be bad luck because of what happened then. The Order of Templars did not disappear. The original Grand Master, Hugh de Payen, was married to a Scottish woman, and they set up the first preceptory there. Its traditions survive today in the Scottish rite of Freemasonry. The Pope and kings of Europe seized what they could, but the order's headquarters on Cyprus was secure. There the order poisoned the king, but were then chased by the Turks to Rhodes. They stayed there for the next 200 years. After 200 years on Rhodes, the order was pushed by the Ottoman Empire to Malta. Here it remained until Napoleon came by in 1798 on his way to Egypt. Their resistance to the emperor was futile. While on Malta, the order did not exhibit any sign of piety. They were noted for debauchery. Their flag, the skull and crossbones, became a standard for pirates. Their tribunal, the armament, controlled the piracy trade. So you all thought I was crazy when I told you that years ago. That the order practiced secrecy should be a tip-off to their designs. What we know of their rules is alarming. The old charges are said to date to the 15th century. One provides that, quote, no brother is to reveal any secret of another brother, if it might cost him his life and his property, end quote. The only Masonic secret which would automatically carry such a penalty is witchcraft. Other charges provide for the king. And anarchists were exiled or sought for arrest. It is also the origin, ladies and gentlemen, of the term used to describe communists which sprang directly from the old order of Templars as fellow travelers. The complex rites of Freemasonry revolve around the temple in Jerusalem, which gave the Templars their name. Much nonsense has been written about it being an innocent group of stonemasons. They may want to appear to be innocent. No explanation can show why stoneworkers would desire such a complex and ancient set of rites. In their new book, The Hiram Key, Knight and Lomas, two Freemasons, explained their years of research showing the Templar-Freemasonry connection, and our own researches have put it beyond any doubt at all. This book is filled with alarming information. The clothing worn during initiation is a replica of that worn by a convicted Satanist before the death penalty was executed. The old symbol of the skull and crossbones is exhibited. Remember that the fraternity that George Bush belonged to at Yale University is the Skull and Bones, also known as the Crypt, also known as the Russell Trust. The pentagram is another mystical symbol of Masonry and witchcraft. Removal of the two horizontal lines leaves the Masonic symbol of the compass and the square. The Star of David has nothing to do with King David or the Hebrew faith. An interesting central character in Freemason mythology is a figure who suffers death rather than divulge the secrets of the order. He is called Hiram Abiff. It is noted that names are codes and reversal of letters is one way to decode them. We have noted elsewhere that inversion is a peculiarity of black magic. We note only as a matter of speculation that the inversion of Hiram Abiff is Maria Phibbs. What could we expect from a group whose secret password is Tubal Cain, or seed of Satan? What the Templars attempt to do is penetrate the church. They existed for 200 years as an official order, and it must have required great evidence for the Pope to condemn one of his own. The stated chief enemy of the order is the church. Revenge for the death of Jacques de Molay is the motive for much of recent history. There is no end to the anti-Catholic, anti-Christian church propaganda today. In the revolutions in England, France, and Russia, all churches were destroyed. Cromwell was Freemason motivated. That the French horror was Illuminati promoted has been well documented. George Washington worked for Lord Fairfax on his Virginia estate. The Fairfax family was very active in the Grand Lodge of York. A predecessor of Lord Fairfax had introduced Freemasonry to Oliver Cromwell. One church which survived Cromwell's rage was the Rosslyn Chapel. This is because it is a Freemason replica of the Temple on the Mount, which gave the Templars their name. Readers may suspect that this author is a royalist and anti-democratic, so we offer this bit. The English kings were also Freemasons, James V and Charles II. This explains the ability of the British crown to survive while all other monarchies have been destroyed. Also, George Washington's involvement in the York Rite is well known. However, it is known that he warned his fellows of the evils of the Bavarian branch called the Illuminati, which ultimately infiltrated and controlled all of Freemasonry. In the Kabbalah, A.E. Waite explains that it was Albert Pike who turned the Scottish Rite into occult study, where he says that the religious object of Freemasonry is the Luciferian philosophy, clearly stated in his tome, Morals and Dogma. This is an apology, for it always was. Waite concludes that Freemasonry originated in the Kabbalah, but that they are not identical. Though historically connected, they are similar only at the high degrees. He notes that there once existed a degree of Knight of the Kabbalah. And I guess that's end of it. Most of this that I just read you is accurate, folks. There are a couple of inaccuracies in there, such as Satanism and witchcraft. They don't believe in Satan. They don't believe in any of that stuff. They believe in magic, and they clearly state in their own publications that magic is the art of illusion. And they practice it well. It's the art of deception. They believe in the Luciferian philosophy, which is this metaphor, ladies and gentlemen, that man was held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust, vindictive, and terrible God. that man was set free from the bonds, the chains of ignorance, through the gift of intellect made by Lucifer through his agent Satan. And through the use of this intellect, man himself will control all nature ultimately in the universe and will himself become God. That's a metaphor. They don't really believe in God or the devil or any of that. What they're trying to say was that man, in his existence as a mindless, thoughtless animal, going through the evolutionary process, became elevated to the point where he can achieve an apotheosis when he finally began to think. These people do want to destroy all religions. They don't believe in any God or religion of any kind. They don't believe in freedom. They believe that they are the only truly mature minds and therefore the only truly warranted leaders of humankind, and that the rest of us are all mindless animals who cannot think. And while we address our prayers to stone idols which cannot speak or answer us, they communicate with the real God, which they say is the intellect. Reason. This all sprang out of the Renaissance, ladies and gentlemen. And their whole effort is to prevent the misery and the destruction and the terrible tortures which occurred during the Dark Ages when the church ruled the world. I agree that they have some merit in their beliefs, and I also agree that their manner of correcting what they see as the wrongs of the world is in itself a travesty and a wrong. For they don't believe in freedom. They are in the process of trying to subjugate the entire human race to a state of enslavement, ruled in what they will call a benevolent dictatorship, where the world will be presented with a Messiah, behind whom a council of wise men will actually rule. And they will rule with an iron fist and no mercy whatsoever. And they haven't hidden any of this. It's all been published. It's all out in the open. It's all available for anybody who wants to know. And we have documented and sourced it for years on this broadcast. And I'm only covering these things because I know there's some of you out there don't have the slightest idea what I've even been talking about. And I'm not fooling myself into thinking that my quick explanations of some of the basic points are going to illuminate you. Now, here is something. Many of you have written me and said there's nothing to this common law. Common law is a bunch of crap. Common law doesn't exist. Common law is worthless. However, where's my... Connie, I'm missing my copy of the Constitution. If you can find it out there, would you please bring it in? Thank you. The common law is protected in the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. And Article 3 courts are common law courts, in case you didn't know that. But there are no common law courts in the nation, anywhere. There are no Article 3 courts in existence. They're all Article 4 courts, statutory courts, courts of equity and admiralty, and military jurisdiction. And that all came about in the Civil War when the nation was divided into military districts, which eventually became district courts. And the United States Attorney, actually it's the, what am I trying to think of here? The United States Judge Advocate General position was done away with, and the Justice Department was created. You see, back before the Civil War, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch were all clearly separate. Two things have happened since then that have destroyed the balance of power between the three branches of government. In the Civil War, the position of Judge Advocate General of the United States of America was done away with. That office was clearly separate from the executive branch and the legislative branch, and was the overseer of the judicial department or judicial branch of government. The Justice Department was then created after the Civil War ended to oversee the military rule in the conquered South and in the military districts, and is a branch of the executive branch of government. See, one of the things that all of you people don't understand is that the Justice Department is not a part of the judicial branch of government, but is an arm of the executive branch of government. And so the balance of power has shifted to the executive branch. The executive branch actually controls the judicial branch, which is not separate at all anymore. The next thing that happened was in 1933, when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared the so-called bank holiday, which wasn't a closing of banks all across America for a long period of time, as you see in these propaganda movies about the so-called Depression, which didn't exist. He closed the banks actually for 3 days. For some banks, it was actually only 2. That's all. But Congress passed a law on March the 9th, transferring the power of the legislative branch of the government to the President, when they gave blanket approval as legislation, as laws, all past, present, and future executive orders that the President may write. And so the President, or the executive branch, had usurped at that time both the judicial and the legislative branch of government. So it's very simple. If Congress fails to pass the legislation the President wants, and he thinks he can get away with it without the ire of the people, he just writes an executive order, which is then implemented as law, even though it is not. The Constitution does not give Congress the authority to do such a thing. It is, in fact, unconstitutional. The usurpation of the judicial branch by destroying or doing away with the office of United States Judge Advocate General and supplanting it with an executive agency known as the Justice Department is also unconstitutional. See, many of you really don't know what happened because you really don't know how this country was set up to operate. And you haven't studied history. It's not taught anymore, and none of you seem to have any interest in seeking it out and discovering it for yourselves. But basically, the President is now the king. And that's the truth of the matter, in a country where there was never supposed to be any king. And that's why, from time to time, you hear us, the citizens of the states, referred to as the subjects of the federal government. You can't be a citizen in a free country and be a subject also. It just can't be. Let me see here. Let me read this to you because it's important to, in order for you to understand the rest of it. So what I'll do is put on some music while I find this, and you can sit back and relax for a moment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I finally found what I'm looking for. And there's a whole bunch of this that I would like to read to you, actually. One of these broadcasts I'm going to have to devote just to the Constitution, and I think that's becoming much more obvious all the time, because most people just don't understand that it's simple and easy to comprehend. And that anybody can do it. You don't need a lawyer. Our founding fathers were brilliant men, geniuses, who understood the English language perfectly well. The discrepancy, folks, is that the meanings of words have been changed since then. If you get a copy of the 1824 Webster's Dictionary, you will see in there that what they wrote, they meant, and it's clear. They didn't write anything veiled or in any kind of language that would be misconstrued later by anybody. Listen to this. See, you're all being told by the newspapers and by Washington, D.C., by the communist news networks, by Ted Koppel and the other scum Marxists who are spouting this propaganda at you. These are the real hate mongers, if you want to know the truth. You're all being told that common law doesn't exist and that it's a bunch of bunk. And anybody who adheres to the common law or believes that there's remedy in the common law is a nut, a wacko, an extremist. But I got to tell you, if the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, they're not. I'm looking at the Bill of Rights, ladies and gentlemen, Article 7. Listen to this. In suits at common law. Did you hear what I said? In suits at common law. Has anybody ever repealed Article 7 or amended Article 7 of the Bill of Rights? No, never. Not even in your wildest dreams. In suits at common law, common law, common law, common law, common law. Got that through your thick heads? In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law, common law, common law, common law, common law, common law, common law. It is the foundation, is the basis upon which this country and its legal system was built. Why is it you hear these blathering bullshit artists bombard you with pablum and insane nonsense night after night, and you don't even bother to check on it? The American people are so easily propagandized and led around by their nose that it is absolutely the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my life. It drives me either from insane laughter rolling on the floor to the biggest flood of tears that I've ever had in my life. Drives me up the wall. I could go on and on and on. Oh, because, folks, you're nuts. Listen to this. I'm going to read you something else that you need to know here. Listen to this. Where is it here? Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. This is something you can all see happening right in front of your nose. This has never been amended, never been changed at all. Listen to this. The Constitution for the United States of America is the supreme law of the land. Do you understand? Anybody who violates the Constitution is engaged in unlawful and even treasonous activity. Listen to what I'm going to tell you right now, because it's clear as a bell. The trial of all crimes. Did you hear what I said? The trial of all crimes. It doesn't say some crimes. It doesn't say burglaries. It says all crimes, except in cases of impeachment. That's the only reservation. Shall be by jury. How about that? Do you know that some people are being charged for crimes in the United States where they're told that they cannot have a jury? That the judge will be the judge and the jury? And pass sentence? Yes, it's true. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury. And such trial shall be held in the state where the said crime shall have been committed. Let me read that to you again, just in case you didn't get it. And then, just in case you haven't understood what I'm getting at here, I'll tell you, because most people have lost the ability of original thought. They have been so propagandized that they can't even think anymore. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury. And such trial shall be held in the state where the said crime shall have been committed. Now let me read you the entire thing just in case you think I'm leaving something out, okay? Because I'm not. But when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may by law have directed. Period. Now some of you are out there scratching your head wondering, what's he talking about? What's he talking about? What's this crazy guy getting to? I'm getting to the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that they threw the Constitution out the window a long time ago. The Marxists and communists in control of our government don't give one whit for this document. They are outlaws and they are committing treason. No doubt about it. What I'm getting at is a lot of things. Number one, a lot of people are being tried in courts by the judge, and when they request a jury trial, they are being denied. That's unconstitutional. It's unlawful. This has never been amended. I'm also getting at the fact that if Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols are accused of blowing up a federal building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, why is the trial being held in Colorado? And why couldn't you think of that? Why did I have to tell you? I could go through each of the clauses of each of the articles in the Constitution and show you where they have thrown it out the window, ladies and gentlemen. And you would never know it because most of you have never even read it, don't own a copy, don't even know where to find it. And that should tell you the sorry state of affairs that this country is in right now. The Constitution is not an old, outdated document penned over 200 years ago by a bunch of doddering, ancient old men who did not understand the complexities of the modern age. It is a living document that provides within it for the method of changing it, if it needs to be changed, upon the will of the people, when and if, and by their permission only, it needs to be changed. And these people are subverting it every day, throwing it out the window, stepping on it, stomping it, flushing it down the toilet, spitting on it. Because the American people don't know what it says and don't seem to care. It is the guardian. It is the guardian of our lives, our liberties, and our fortunes. Without it, there is no protection from despotism, which is coming so swiftly that when it arrives, you're going to look around and say, what in the hell happened? Yesterday everything was okay. Today I'm a slave. But how would you ever know? If you never knew you were free. And if you never knew what freedoms you possessed, and what protected them, and how, and where it was found, and who wrote it, and why they wrote it, and what they intended, how would you know? I'm going to tell you right now something you're not going to like. Most of you are slaves already, and you don't even know it. You don't even know it. I can go anywhere, in this town or any other town, and stop anybody and ask them to tell me in a nutshell what the Bill of Rights is, and you would be amazed at the answers that I will get. Absolutely amazed. I can walk in this town or any other town and ask, what is the Constitution for the United States of America? What does it say? What does it do? And you would be absolutely amazed at the answers that I will get. Because I've done it before. One guy told me he thought the Bill of Rights was the laundry bill. And he was dead serious. He was about 24 years old. Young man in the prime of life. Told me that the Bill of Rights was a laundry bill. Most people, when you ask them what is the Bill of Rights, they'll give you some vague notion of freedom of speech or freedom of the press. You ask them to expound upon those two things, the only two things that can come to their mind because they don't know anything else, and they'll give you the craziest answers you ever heard in your life. all the way from all the newspapers tell us the truth, and they're free to get the truth, and so we can believe everything that they say in there, till we can say whatever we want, whenever we want, and if we write a book, it has to be published. That's nonsense. Total nonsense. Just total nonsense, folks. Incredible. From Pennsylvania Law Encyclopedia. Based on Pennsylvania statutes, case law, state and federal, Attorney General opinions, and law reviews, Volume 7. Certiorari continuance. George T. Bishop Company, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. West Publishing Company, St. Paul, Minnesota. March 10th, 1997. Actually, I believe it was printed in 1991. Nevertheless, listen, common law, definitions and distinctions. 2, nature. 3, sources. 4, adoption and application. 5, modification. 1, definitions and distinctions. The term common law may be said to designate that part of the common law of England which had been adopted and was in force here at the time of the Revolution, and which so far as it has not been expressly abrogated is recognized as a part of our jurisprudence. The term is frequently used in another sense to designate the unwritten law. The term common law has been used in different senses. In its widest sense, the term may designate all that part of the positive law, juristic theory, and ancient custom of any state or nation which is of general and universal application, as distinguished from local or special laws, rules, or customs. As concerns its force and authority in the United States, the phrase designates that portion of the common law of England, including such acts of Parliament as, where applicable, which had been adopted and was in force here at the time of the Revolution. This, so far as it has not since been expressly abrogated, is recognized as an organic part of the jurisprudence of most of the United States, period, end of subject. Grow up. Please, grow up before you destroy us. Please? Would you please, could you please, can you find it in your hearts to please do that? Stop being stupid, ignorant, apathetic, uncaring, selfish children, and grow up before we lose that is most dear to all of us, and that which most of us does not even recognize as being most dear, because they have always had it, don't even know they've had it, and will not even miss it until it's gone, and then they will understand that everything else that they ever do or want or cherish is built upon that one thing, and that is freedom. It is the uniting common bond of all Americans, if you are an American. If you are a socialist, get the hell out of my country and stay out. What are you doing here anyway? There are socialist countries all over the world where you could be happy and live under the kind of government that you so cherish. Why are you here destroying America? Why can't you leave us alone? Those are rhetorical questions, ladies and gentlemen, because I already know the answer to them. Their goal is the world. They can never be happy in one country governed by socialism. Their goal is the world. No state shall tender in payment of debt anything other than gold and silver coin. Oh, really? Where's the gold and silver coin? And which state is paying its debt in gold and silver coin? And if that's true, that's another indication that the Constitution has been flushed down the toilet. But you never read it. You don't have a copy, so you think I'm inventing this, don't you? I'll get one and read it, because I'm not. When you finally begin to understand, maybe you'll join our ranks. I hope you do, because we need soldiers in this fight. I got to tell you that. If you think it's not a fight, you're nuts. World War III is being waged right now in the world. Right now. Started a long time ago. And it is for the world. Dear Bill, thank you for contacting regarding the establishment of the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. I appreciate having the benefit of your thoughts on this issue. You are quite correct when you state that an organization with the actual name Internal Revenue Service was not established by law. It's signed by Pat Danner, member of Congress, and it was written to Bill Peterson, not me. You see, the Internal Revenue Service is not an agency of the federal government. They claim that they are an agency of the Treasury Department, of the executive branch of government. But yet, when you look in the United States Code, under the organization of the Treasury Department, there is no such Internal Revenue Service listed. And I got news for you. The Secret Service is not listed either. They're not an agency of the United States government or of the Treasury Department, as they claim either. They're fabrications, deceptions, lies. And they are working under the color of law. They have no lawful authority whatsoever. Didn't know that, did you? Title 26 of the United States Code, which is the Internal Revenue Service regulations, ladies and gentlemen, was never enacted into law either. You didn't know that either, did you? It was never printed in the Federal Register and therefore is not law. And we are not subject to it. Did you know that? No, you didn't. I have here about an inch-thick brief sent to me by Larry Beecraft, who's one of the best lawyers in the country, proving that the Internal Revenue Service is not an agency of the United States government or of the executive branch or of the Treasury Department. Proving it. And by law, no such agency can exist except by act of Congress. Did you know that? Did you know that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is not an agency of the United States government either, but was created, like the Internal Revenue Service, by the stroke of a pen of a bureaucrat within the Justice Department and is, in fact, an internal investigative office of the Justice Department whose authority does not extend beyond its ability to investigate the internal workings of the Justice Department. And over the years, it has become the Gestapo of the United States of America. Did you know that? No, of course you didn't, because you just go on faith. Because it is, it must have authority, and because it is, it must be okay. The communists have, since their inception, ladies and gentlemen, since their creation in the late 1700s, vowed to take over the world and destroy all nations from within, and that's exactly what they're doing. But whether you call them Marxists, or socialists, or communists, they're all exactly the same thing. The same thing, the same organization, pulling the same scams and destroying people like they always have in their history. The Constitution of the United States makes provision for the manner and method of appointing officers of the United States via Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution. The President shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States, whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. But the Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper, in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments, pursuant to the Constitution. An officer of the United States is one who has been appointed with the Senate's consent to an office established by law. An inferior officer is appointed through the same method, except consent of the Senate is not necessary. How has the Supreme Court construed this provision of the Constitution? In United States versus Mowat, 124, United States Supreme Court, 303, S. Court, 505, 1888, the Supreme Court was required to determine whether a Navy paymaster's clerk was an officer who could recover traveling expenses as allowed by law only for officers. Here, the court was required to define the method for the appointment of officers of the United States, and it held, quote, under the Constitution of the United States, all its officers were appointed by the President, by and with the consent of the Senate, or by a court of law, or the head of a department, and the heads of the departments were defined in that opinion to be what are now called the members of the Cabinet. Unless a person in the service of the government, therefore, holds his place by virtue of an appointment by the President or of one of the courts of justice or heads of departments authorized by law to make such an appointment, he is not, strictly speaking, an officer of the United States. 8 Supreme Court at 506. Since in this case Mowat was not appointed by the President, the court found it essential to determine whether he had been appointed by the head of a department, there being no statute authorizing the Secretary of the Navy to approve Mowat's appointment. The court concluded that he was not even an inferior officer. Quote, but there is no statute authorizing the Secretary of the Navy to appoint a paymaster's clerk, nor is there any act requiring his approval of such an appointment, and the regulations of the Navy do not seem to require any such appointment or approval for the holding of that position. The claimant, therefore, was not an officer, either appointed by the President or under the authority of any law vesting such appointment in the head of a department. 8 Supreme Court at 507. End quote. For this reason, it was held that Mowat was not entitled to travel expenses authorized to be paid to officers of the United States. Another important case regarding the appointment of United States officers is United States versus Smith, 124, United States Supreme Court, 525, 8 Supreme Court, 595, 1888. Here, Smith was being prosecuted for embezzlement committed while he was employed as a clerk in the office of the Collector of the Customs. Since the statute under which Smith was being charged applied solely to officers of the United States, the court was again required to define who was such an officer. Quote, an officer of the United States can only be appointed by the President by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, or by a court of law, or the head of a department. A person in the service of the government who does not derive his position from one of these sources is not an officer of the United States in the sense of the Constitution. 8 Supreme Court at 597. And that's an end quote. In this case, Smith was found not to be an officer because he was neither appointed by the President or the head of his department. Quote, there must be, therefore, a law authorizing the head of a department to appoint clerks of the collector before his approbation of their appointment can be required. No such law is in existence, end quote. 8 Supreme Court at 598. You see what I'm getting at, folks? If there is no law passed by Congress authorizing the head of a department to appoint clerks, then it cannot be done. It is thus very clear that the Constitution, as well as a variety of decisions of the courts, have provided the basic parameters to determine who is precisely an officer of the United States. See United States versus Lee, 106, U.S. Supreme Court 196, 220, 1 Supreme Court 240, 1882. All the officers of the government, from the highest to the lowest, are creatures of the law and are bound to obey it. Norton versus Shelby County, 118, United States Supreme Court, 425, 441, 6, Supreme Court, 1121, 1886. There can be no officer, either de jure or de facto, if there be no office to fill. And NLRB versus Coca-Cola Bottling Company of Louisville, 350, United States Supreme Court, 264, 269, 76, Supreme Court, 383, 1956. Officers normally means those who hold defined offices. It does not mean the boys in the back room or other agencies of invisible government, whether in politics or in the trade union movement, etc., etc., etc. And I have pages and pages and pages of the exact pages from the exact documents which I have been quoting to you, ladies and gentlemen. Offices of the United States are extremely easy to create. To establish a public office, all Congress has historically done is enact legislation that expressly declares that an office is being created. For example, on February the 14th, 1903, Congress created the Department of Commerce and Labor, 32 Statutes 825. Quote, that there shall be at the seat of government an executive department to be known as the Department of Commerce and Labor, and a Secretary of Commerce and Labor, who shall be the head thereof, who shall be appointed by the President, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, end quote. There is no such law for the Internal Revenue Service, nor any law for any Bureau of Internal Revenue, nor any law for the Secret Service, nor any law for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, period, anywhere. Don't believe me? Go to the law library and look it up. Don't believe me? Write to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Internal Revenue Service and ask for the enabling legislation by Congress which established that agency as an agency of the United States government, and see what you get back. But this is not the only example, ladies and gentlemen. There are a multitude of others. During the war between the states, Congress established a variety of bureaus. On July 5th, 1862, Congress enacted a law which established several bureaus in the Navy Department. 12 statutes, 510. Quote, that there shall be established in the Navy Department the following bureaus to wit. First, a Bureau of Yards and Docks. Second, a Bureau of Equipment and Recruiting. Third, a Bureau of Navigation. Fourth, a Bureau of Ordnance. Fifth, a Bureau of Construction and Repair. Sixth, a Bureau of Steam Engineering. Seventh, a Bureau of Provisions and Clothing. Eighth, a Bureau of Medicine and Surgery. On June 20th, 1864, Congress created a Bureau to dispense military justice. 13 statutes, 144 and 145. Quote, Section 5, and be it further enacted that there shall be attached to and made a part of the War Department during the continuance of the present rebellion a bureau to be known as the Bureau of Military Justice, end quote. Later, on March 3rd, 1865, Congress established another similar bureau, 13 Statutes 507, quote, that there is hereby established in the War Department to continue during the present War of Rebellion and for 1 year thereafter a Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. The said bureau shall be under the management and control of a commissioner to be appointed by the President by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. And on and on and on. See also 42 Statutes 139, 140, Section 8. Quote, that there is hereby created and established in the Department of the Navy a Bureau of Aeronautics, end quote. On May 27th, 1930, a bureau was established in the Justice Department, 46 Statutes 427. Quote, there shall be in the Department of Justice a Bureau of Prohibition, at the head of which shall be a Director of Prohibition. The Director of Prohibition shall be appointed by the Attorney General without regard to the civil service laws, end quote. Do you understand what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? I can go on and on. Through every legally and lawfully established bureau in government, there is no such law. No such law for any such Bureau of Internal Revenue or Internal Revenue Service or Secret Service or Federal Bureau of Investigation. Bill Peterson wrote to Congress and asked for the truth, and got the truth. Quote, you are quite correct when you state that an organization with the actual name Internal Revenue Service was not established by law. End quote. Period. End of subject. Good night, and God bless each and every single one of you.